An American filmmaker whose father came from Hong Kong has tried to capture the real city in a 7-minute production called Hong Kong Strong that's proved a real hit with locals. Let's show you a bit of it.
I'm Brandon Lee. I'm in Seoul, Korea right now, and I am at Gwangjang Market. This is a traditional local market here. I'm going to show you some of my shooting process of how I capture this stuff on camera.
But how do you balance enjoying the moment and getting those shots that you need? I've done a YouTube video on this, and I have my own opinions, but I wanted to get your thoughts. How do you balance that?
Well, I'll start off by saying that most of the really cool shots in my film were no fun at all to shoot. They were really, really difficult and physically painful, especially those gimbal shots, like long gimbal shots, or shots that are from really crazy angles, or shots that have like really specific timing that's going on, you know, between the camera and the subject.
Which one?
Those kind of shots.
Which one hurt the most?
It's just like shooting. What's that?
Which one hurt the most? Which one was the most intense?
Which one hurt the most? This shot pulling out of the window, I had my camera on a gimbal on a monopod, and it was raised up, and I just pulled, you know, with the camera starting all the way in the window and just walked straight backwards. I do a lot of these kinds of just generic building shots where I do gimbal moves around the building. I build up sort of a library of those kinds of shots of buildings when I have downtime on my shoots and I don't have anything more specific planned to do. I find that those shots tend to be really useful for getting me in or out of scenes.
Now, this is a 1-in-a-million snapshot. The moment that a filmmaker was flying a drone over the high-rise buildings of Hong Kong when he chanced upon a newlywed couple on a roof, lying down in a star pose for their wedding photos. The image has now gone viral, and the hunt is on to try to find out who the newlyweds are.
I was actually intending mostly to shoot the sunset with the drone. I was just pointing the drone out toward the horizon. There's beautiful mountains. The drone's battery was going dead. I just pointed the camera of the drone straight down to capture, you know, whatever was happening on as the drone returned home automatically. Now I'm going to give you some advice as a filmmaker. Speaking from my own experience, there's one important question I think every artist needs to ask themselves. How can I stand out from other people in my genre or in my specific field? What are the trends right now, and how can I do things differently and better?
Guy shooting reality shows with two RX 100s, one in each hand, and I said, whoa, this guy is doing something different, and he just innovates the hell out of everything. So it's really been a pleasure to be a fanboy of these last dozen or so years.
Funny you mentioned that, Bob. That's where I got exposed to Brandon in his run gun shoot blog, and he had the RX 100s and a little lapel mic. And
my name is Ben Coe. I'm the Program and Events Chair for the Ohio Valley chapter of the American Society of Media Photographers. I'm just going to do a quick little intro of what ASMP is, and then I'm going to hand it off to Brandon and Jim. So ASMP is a professional trade society of about 6,500 photographers who shoot still and motion. Sorry, I'm trying to manage the meeting as well. Who shoot still and motion for a living. And one of the things that we do, there are 38 chapters in the US, and one of the things that we do is sponsor events like this, to share information, to meet inspiring people in the field. And that's one of the reasons we're so excited to have Brandon today, because his work and the way he has shaped his career and even living his life is very, very inspiring. So on that note, I am going to hand it off to Brandon and Jim.
I have just a little bit of housekeeping in the beginning, and I want to talk about how this talk came together. It came together relatively quickly, and in conversing with Ben about putting it together, I said that, oh, Brandon's my favorite travel filmmaker, and he's just a master of camera movement. And I really believe we've seen his style often copied, but never duplicated. And my first exposure was years ago with his Run Gun Shoot blog, when he was using small Sony cameras to film an MTV reality show. And when we put the word out about this ASMP Tech Talk, I have some notes here. We have in the audience today, at least one is a cinematographer, photographer, director, and is part of a team that won a Pulitzer and Emmy. At least one is a longtime assignment photographer for National Geographic and Smithsonian, and more than one have shot for National Geographic. At least one's a longtime journalist for MSNBC. At least one is a unit still photographer and cinematographer. And I think it's safe to say that they're all Brandon Lee fans. And also in this audience, ASMP, with our roots in photography years ago, I think there are a number of attendees that are going to be photographers that are just turning to filmmaking and have questions about that. So what we want to do is we kind of want to balance. We want to give everyone some inspiration, and we want to try and ask some questions that people can get some practical knowledge about Brandon, the filmmaking process. I am a filmmaker here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I began my photography career in the 1980s and joined ASMP in the 1990s. And I was one of those people that when Canon came out with cameras that DSLRs that shot not only stills, but video, that's where I began my conversion, like so many people did. And that happened at the same time as social media and accessibility to video on YouTube came about. And that's really something we're going to talk to Brandon about, and that wave that he rode. So we do a big part of today. We want you to ask your questions. Please leave questions in the chat. Ben's going to be watching those. And when we get to the end of our discussion, we're going to turn the mics over to you guys and let you ask Brandon the questions that you have. So Brandon, would you care to give a little introduction to yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name is Brandon Lee, no relation to Bruce Lee's son, in case you're wondering. And I am American, grew up in the Midwest of America in St. Louis, Missouri, to a mixed family. My dad's from Hong Kong, my mom's American. And I always wanted to do some kind of video or some kind of movies. And I was the only one of my friends who wanted to do it. So I got to know how to do all of the aspects of shooting and editing because there was nobody else to help me out. And, you know, sort of became a one-man band throughout basically my childhood and my adulthood. And then I went into film school. I went to the University of North Carolina, the School of the Arts there, studied film, realized I didn't really want to do it that way, the way they were teaching me with the big crew, you know, spending months revising your short film before you ever actually shoot anything, spending so much time conceptualizing instead of actually doing it. I liked to be out there in the world doing stuff, and film school made me wait too long. So after film school, I started working in reality TV, doing follow doc. So basically following people around and documenting their lives for the show True Life on MTV.
And I worked on that show for a few years. And that was fun because it was like the opposite of film school. I got to just like go out, shoot stuff, be completely autonomous. It was basically like my kit, my crew was me, a camera, a couple wireless mics, a folder, a manila folder of releases, and an Amex Gold card. And with that, I was expected to make an entire show. And I did over and over for a few years for MTV. And then I realized that that was a little limiting unto itself because I wanted to explore more of my creative muscle. So then I got some invitations to do more work out in Dubai, out in the Middle East. And I started doing commercial work out there. And I finally got to do more shooting that was related to what I had originally studied in film school. And from Dubai, I had the opportunity to travel to the other half of the world because Dubai is very centrally located to Asia, the other Gulf countries, even Africa, Europe. It's easy to get around the whole side of the world that I'd never seen before, being centered in Dubai. So I lived there for a couple of years. I started traveling, and basically in between my jobs in Dubai, I started making travel videos just for fun. And at first, it was just kind of a little side thing because I had a lot of downtime and I just wanted to stay creative, and it gave me an excuse to travel with my camera. But then I got more and more serious about them because I just really found a lot of inspiration in traveling. And my travel videos I started posting them on Vimeo, which is, if you're not familiar, Vimeo is like kind of the art school version of YouTube for filmmakers. It's more of a portfolio site, less of a social media site. And some of my travel videos started getting staff picked on Vimeo. That's a front page feature. The staff will pick your video, put it on the front page for a few days. And back when that was happening, that started happening like 2014, 2015. The staff pick was actually a pretty big deal in the creative community. I think it's less so now because Vimeo has just sort of, I don't know, lost the zeitgeist. I mean, I still covet staff picks, but you don't get as many views, you don't get as much recognition as you did back then. But those staff picks led to a lot more creative work for me for a lot more different kinds of clients around the world. I worked in Hong Kong, I worked in mainland China, Greece, all Italy, all around the US. Just did one in Boston a couple years ago, I guess about a year and a half ago now. So basically getting staff picked on Vimeo was kind of the launch pad for me doing work in my style instead of following a style book and doing work in the style of the show that I was working on. So now I kind of was the show, people were hiring me to do my thing. So that was a big transition point in my career. And, from those little creative side projects, I started getting professional projects that allowed me to have a lot of autonomy. And then after that, after I started posting more Vimeo stuff, getting more staff picks, and doing more of that creative work and posting it, I started getting a lot of questions from other filmmakers, other people who wanted to do, this kind of shooting and editing because it was still fairly new. And rather than answer the myriad of comments and questions that I was getting on social media and in my inbox and in my email, I started a YouTube channel. So I started a channel basically as a tutorial channel for people who wanted to learn filmmaking. And the YouTube channel, which I really got into that around 2016, 2017, at first was basically just my public FAQ. It was just like, okay, I've gotten a lot of these questions, so I'm going to make a video about each question. That way they're all answered and it's public and it's done. But then, the YouTube channel started getting more followers and I started getting more requests to make other kinds of videos. Eventually I started getting sponsorships. So that kind of turned into sort of a business unto itself and also another outlet for my creativity because Vimeo was sort of becoming a little less popular and YouTube was getting a lot more popular. So I started posting my travel films on YouTube. And even though there wasn't the cachet of getting a staff pick, there still was, a huge audience waiting that I could access, I could tap into just by posting a video. So I started posting, my travel films and my tutorials, mostly on YouTube. And that has been sort of my trajectory ever since. It's kind of a mix of, I do a mix of commercial work, personal projects. I try to do at least one big travel film a year and tutorials that I post on YouTube. And I also, of course, have my Instagram account where I post mostly behind the scenes stuff of my shoots. And I have my own film school online that's called Unscripted Studio, where I go more in depth about the filmmaking techniques that I talk about on my YouTube channel. So yeah, it's basically mostly online stuff that I do, mostly related to travel, mostly related to culture, and also tutorials teaching how to do this kind of filmmaking. And yeah, this
And
is, I'm going from here.
but Brandon, where are you located right now, and what are you up to currently? Do you have any projects going at the moment?
Currently, I'm in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and my year is just beginning. I'm judging a contest for DJI currently. It's called the Sky Pixel Contest, where you can post your drone videos or anything that you shot on DJI on their Sky Pixel website. And I'm going through like hundreds of submissions, picking out my favorites. That's one of my early little projects this year. I'm also I'm helping to develop a short film that I hope to shoot in a month or two. It's about ballet in Hungary with a filmmaker based out of Budapest. And I've been in talks with someone in the Gulf state who wants me to do a travel film about their culture, and it's all very vague. So I don't really want to, can't really talk too much about that one quite yet because it's in early stages. And on the side, I've just been making some very small projects with friends, some Instagram reels, just exploring creative ideas, and also talking to some buddies of mine about doing more short films that are based on like action and stunts, because that's another thing that I love. And it's another aspect of filmmaking that I've been trying to develop. And there's actually a pretty robust scene of like independent filmmakers who make action films in Thailand, in Bangkok. So I've sort of tapped into that scene a little bit, getting to know those people, and I've worked on a couple small projects with them. I'm just hoping to snowball it and do a few more because yeah, it's just another thing I like to do.
That's very cool. That kind of ties into the first clip I want to show. Ben, if you could prepare the Soul Wave intro. I'd love to show an intro to one of Brandon's videos, because I think it's very distinctive. You know, when one of his videos begins, that you're just about to enter a different world. And so that's just 30 seconds. And I want to talk to you, you know, it sparked when you were talking about action and the way that the action genre really interests you. But I think higher level, you really have a unique vision, and that's what people come to you for, and a unique perspective. And can you talk a little bit about that perspective and how it formed?
I would say that my video style started when I realized that I was a terrible photographer. Because originally I wanted to do photography. That was like the first thing I tried when I was getting into visual arts. But I was so bad at composing a satisfying frame. Like it never turned out the way that I thought it was gonna look. And I realized that my specialty was not in the composition, but in the movement and capturing the energy of something. So I started basically focusing on like what kind of motion do I find interesting.
Give people something to care about. Give people something to care about.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I cared about those people and their culture. I thought, you know, basically to me, these were, there was I don't want to use the word nobility, but there was a strength in the way they live their lives. Every day is hard. Everything they do is hard. And still, they they seem to have either just a stoicism about them, like there was no whining, there was no complaining, at least that I could tell. They just did it, and they functioned and they stayed together. Um, and also there was a lot of light moments, like funny moments, you know, little moments of levity. Like the daughter, she liked to chase the yaks that they herded around and try to catch them, which of course she would never catch them because she's tiny. But you know, I was filming her and she slipped on some mud and she fell down and her dad picked her up and then she was just giggling about it. And I put that in the film because to me that's a real moment that shows that their life is not there. These are not just like artifacts of the past. These people are living now and they have a sense of humor. You know, I also filmed a story about two brothers who wrestled each other and they would always get pissed off when they lost the wrestling match, you know, and that became part of the story. Like the younger brother, the older brother was the champion, the younger brother was not a champion. So the older brother was always win, and the younger brother always got pissed off about it. And I caught that little dynamic. And I also caught how when the younger brother lost the wrestling match, all the little boys thought it was hilarious and they would laugh about it. And, you know, that became part of the story. So I wanted to just make them feel like living, breathing people who existed in the present day, as opposed to remnants of a dying culture, which is how I see them portrayed in a lot of documentaries. You know, people take these sepia toned photographs of them as if it's some 19th century, you know, artifact that they came across. But, you know, these are people, they're still there now. Like you could fly out to Western Mongolia and you'd go see them and they'd be doing this. And they're still, they are 2023 as much as we are. And, you know, well, I filmed this back in 2015, but you know, that's the humanity anyway I wanted to bring to this story. And that's what I hope came through. It made it different from other documentaries about the same people.
And many of us wonder when you do enter these new cultures, and it doesn't have to be about this one specifically, but how you do make these relationships and you do gain this trust. Are there any, is there a method you follow, or is every case unique? What is it like entering all these different countries, these different cultures, and assimilating and gaining that trust?
Well, okay, so I did reality TV for a while as a sort of fly on the wall. Like that was my job, was to sort of, you know, observe and report people's lives. And from that, I learned that you basically you have to use an alternating series of techniques to get people to be natural on camera, and completely candid. The first technique is just perseverance until they forget about the camera. So like with the nomads, with most people that I film who are a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit wary of the camera, the first thing I do is I film something I probably won't use. That's very easy for them. That's very comfortable for them. So if somebody wants to show me their entire collection of like old albums or the rugs that they've knitted or something, and I don't think it's the most like cinematic or visceral thing, I'll still film it because that's the thing that gets them over the fear of the camera. And then after that, I just don't stop filming. And if the person has gotten to the point where they sort of forgot about the camera, then they'll just go about their lives as if I'm not even there. And then I can actually capture like real, like verisimilitude, you know, real authenticity of their lives. So that's technique number one. It's just sort of waiting it out, you know, and filming some intro little scene with them before we get into the real stuff. The next technique would be to simply tell people don't look at the camera. Like it sounds like super simple, but you'd be surprised how many shots are improved simply by learning the local language or writing it down or you know, using your translator or whatever, just telling them, please don't look at the camera. That's like sort of rule number one. And then people will do stuff where otherwise it would be like a very self-conscious type of scene, but it will come across on camera as being very candid. Like the women cooking, you know, in that Nomads clip. They were glancing at the camera every once in a while, and I just asked my guide, my translator, tell them, please, while you cook, don't look at the camera. And they're like, oh, okay. Because they didn't know if they were supposed to look at me, you know? And now they knew they didn't have to look at me, and then it came across totally candid. And then, you know, I mean, I could go on and on about techniques like this. But then there's also like, whenever possible, I hang out with these people. Like if I don't have a shared language, I can only hang out with them to a certain extent. But when I film people who do speak my language, or if I have a really good translator and we can sort of get things going fluidly, like I will have dinner with them, I'll have beers with them before, during, and after the shoot. We'll take meal breaks together. We'll take a break to go, like I'll give them my camera and let them go shoot some stuff on their own. Why not? You know, see what they come up with. Definitely with the kids, I always give the kids the camera to try out if they're interested, and the parents always think that's cute. And we just kind of like, we blur the line between what's the shoot and what's the hangout time. Because remember, the dinner scene for the Nomads, that was my dinner that they were cooking. I filmed them making my dinner for me, and that was supposed to be, they thought I finished, they thought the shoot is over when the sun goes down. You know, that's normal. Sun goes down, shoot's over. So they thought the shoot was over, and they were making dinner for us. They didn't know why I was still filming, but they also didn't ask me to stop. But yeah, I like to blur that line, and I keep shooting even when everybody thinks we should have been finished. I just bring out the camera whenever it feels right.
I think, yeah, I think we're going to have plenty of questions, I believe, on your process. I think maybe I'd like to shift over to business and how you have converted these self-assignments, creating this work on your own, into different streams of revenue. And I think it would be cool to show, Ben, if you have it queued up, the some 360 video, the clip 4 action and the clip 4 behind the scenes.
Every second and hour. I think I used to be sweeter, but now I'm feeling too sour. I used to feel.
Can you set this up a little? Oh, here we go. Yep, we'll watch the video. Saw a little bit of and that was that a sponsored video, Brandon?
That was a sponsored video. It was sponsored by Insta360, and they are the company that makes that camera that I was using. It's a 360 camera.
And I think what's cool is you now have people seeking you to for sponsorships online, and then you also create behind the scenes, and you freely share what you do online. And can you talk about some of the business opportunities that it's brought you by going out there and doing your self-assignments?
Sure. I mean, the thing is, you know, the way I shoot, things I shoot, it's all very accessible to people who are working independently, or they're working alone. You know, nothing that you see in my videos is something that another solo shooter who has some modern, like, consumer or prosumer level gear could not do. You know, I'm not out there doing like multi-million-dollar level VFX. I'm not using REs. I'm not shooting in sound stages, green screens, you know. So it's accessible stuff. And that has led to a lot of sponsorship from the companies who make that stuff, like this 360 camera. This is a camera that came out, I guess, a couple years ago now. And the way it works basically is I get emails from companies who are about to release a product, and they say, you know, this product is coming out on this date, and they say, can we send you a camera, and are you willing to do a sponsored video? And so we negotiate a fee for the sponsorship. There's a deadline. I have deliverables. You know, I need to show these features of the camera. I need to create a demo, creative film, and then I need to also show behind the scenes of the film. It has to be a certain length. The video has to be, you know, at least, let's say, 8 minutes long. It has to include, you know, certain mentions of certain promotions, or maybe there's like a Black Friday sale or something. I have to mention that if that's a part of it. So yeah, basically it's basically like I'm making a commercial, but I'm posting it myself on my own channel. And sometimes the company has the option to repost on their channel, their own social media. That becomes part of the deal. And sometimes also a company will want me to be on a multiple video contract. So they'll say, we're going to have 4 major product releases in 2024, and we want to negotiate an all-in fee for 4 videos over the year. And what would that be? So then that gives me some job security, basically, because I know that I'll have you know, four different chunks of cash coming in. And that has become, yeah, that's become one of my major revenue streams, to be honest, the YouTube channel, doing these sponsored videos, because honestly, I don't earn money off views. My videos don't get enough views. I'm not getting like millions of views per video. And that's what you really need in order to make like any money that you could actually live off of. So instead, I rely more on the individual sponsorships from companies who are releasing products. And the most profitable kind of video, at least in my niche, is product release. So it's the video that comes out the very day that the product is released. And usually there's what's called a review embargo before that product is released. In other words, before August 31st, nobody can post a video about this product. And then on August 31st at 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, everybody posts videos about this product all at once. That's why you see, you know, 50 reviews pop up of the same camera all at the same time, you know, all at once, because they're all under review embargo. They're not all sponsored. That doesn't mean they're all sponsored. Some of them just received a review unit and then they make a video for free because they don't want to be sponsored. They want to give their honest opinion. But my sponsored videos are usually not reviews. They are product showcases. Here's the product. Here's what's great about it. And here's the footage that I created with the product.
Right. And you've also done work for companies like BMW and Nike, and you have your signature style of working. When companies like that hire you for commercial work, do you get to continue with your signature style, or are you now working with larger crews?
For those gigs, usually what happens is a creative agency will create a storyboard. The creative agency may or may not also be the production company. Sometimes the creative agency will enlist a director's rep company, and the director's rep company will then enlist me. So I come in fairly late to those projects usually. They already have existing storyboards, but generally the understanding is because they're bringing me on, I'm able to interpret the storyboards very loosely. But the storyboards are used to win the job. They're used to give the client something to go off of before I start. But if you compare the final product with the storyboards, usually with my work, the final product bears no resemblance. It's like completely different, because I just end up running around with my camera, getting whatever shots I think are cool. And I usually do the editing myself too. And as long as the client likes it, we're all good. And, you know, I've had a pretty good success rate. We've had some rougher times, but most of the time the client's pretty happy with how it comes out.
That's very cool. So you're brought in as kind of a DP, but you're a director of photography, but you're taking the story where you feel it should go. You're adding your creative, and then you get to edit at the end.
Yeah, I usually negotiate to edit at the end because it gives me control. You know, it is also more income because I'm paid for the edit time as well. And my style is not just shooting. It's the shoot plus the edit. So if I shoot it and somebody else edits it, the client's not really they're not getting what they came for, you know, what they hired me for.
Right, right. And then I just love to conclude before we go to questions, talking about, you've mentioned that Vimeo really broke things open for you, the role of social media. What do you think for the average creator out there? What's a good way for them to enter social media, and what are the benefits they might get as a result?
Social media is such a broad term now, and I think what's happening is that social media is becoming media. And influencer advertisement, like I'm an influencer. I don't like the word any more than anybody else does, but there's no other way to describe what I'm doing with these product showcase sponsored videos. This is influencing. This is becoming a major form of advertising. It's not just a niche internet thing anymore. So now there, you know, budgets that would have been spent on a single TV commercial are being spent on 50, 100 influencers to create their own little commercials for the product. And like it or not, this is a reality, and it's going to become more ubiquitous as mono media fades. You know, TV becomes less popular or whatever. Can't really advertise on Netflix, at least not yet. What are you going to do? You know, you have to post, you have to advertise somewhere else. So I think if somebody's going to start a social media channel, they should be very honest with themselves about what they want to get out of it. Do you want to get creative work? Do you want to get hired as a photographer? Do you want to get hired as a videographer for your creative services? If that's the case, then create a very curated portfolio and just treat it like treat your social media channel like a portfolio. You are posting work that says, this is my distinct style, and keep that style very consistent. You know, if it's black and whites, make it all black and whites. If it's sepia tone portraits, make it all sepia tone portraits, or at least, you know, similar. If you're shooting video and you're posting mostly vertical, keep it vertical. Don't go vertical, horizontal, vertical. Because people who follow you, they'll expect repetition. They'll expect the same thing over and over and over. And if you can't stick to that, maybe it's, you know, at least you're not going to grow as fast. Look, my own portfolio site is not, that's not an example to follow. I post random stuff and it's all different, and it hasn't grown as fast as a lot of other people's because I haven't done it right. But yeah, the realistic viewpoint on building a portfolio audience is that you need to be very, very consistent with a particular style. Now, there's other ways to go about it. If you want sponsorships for behind the scenes type stuff, you're a photographer who's also a camera geek, and you really want to talk about cameras and you want to get sponsored, get all the new cameras for free, get paid to talk about cameras. That's another thing. You have to be good on camera. You have to be good at, I'm not saying you have to be like good looking, or that you have to be funny, or that you even have to be exactly interesting. You have to be clear, and you have to give people what they want to hear. And again, I'm not the best. Like, there's other people, let's say Peter McKinnon, for instance, on YouTube, or Maddie Hapoya, or even Casey Neistat, or whatever. Those guys are way better on camera than me. I'm like a behind the scenes, mostly like a nerd, you know, who prefers to just hold the camera. I'm very dry, you know, I'm not as like sparkly and bubbly and fun as them. But if you can come across, if you can bring that big energy, that's actually what's kind of going to like grow a BTS type channel, or a channel talking about the process, talking about the gear, talking about what makes you, you know, what makes a good photograph, or what makes a good film. So that's another thing you just have to be realistic about. Like, if you have a strong accent and it's difficult to understand what you say, if you don't enjoy speaking for hours and hours, you know, on camera, if you don't enjoy editing your own face and your own voice, then that kind of channel might not be for you. And again, you have to post regularly.
Well, I think a key thing that you've said there is that that's where advertising dollars are going. And I think you've ridden a couple of waves here. It's like television used to be, you know, 3 cameras and a studio audience, and then you were there with reality TV with MTV's Real Life, where you're given a gold Amex card in 6 months, and it's just you, and you're producing the whole show and filming the whole show. And then as advertising dollars migrated online, you were there for that also. You know, we just heard about challenges at Sports Illustrated and the Los Angeles Times, and all of these things. So I think it's easy for us as consumers of just YouTube to not realize really that this is where dollars are flowing.
Yes, and you can build an income off a YouTube channel. Like, there's a middle class of YouTube. It's a big, big middle class. You don't have to be super crazy viral. You don't need millions of followers. You can have 10,000 subscribers and still have an income off YouTube. Your videos can be getting 1,000 views each, and you can still have an income off YouTube, because those big budgets are getting sliced up into little pies. And you might get a few $100 per video, you know, to do little sponsorships here and there. And if you crank out those videos, it can turn into a sizable, at least a side income, or, you know, your main income, just depending on how much you output. So it is possible. You know, it's not like a pipe dream to make a living off YouTube. It's a pipe dream to make millions and have a brand new Beverly Hills mansion off YouTube. But to have a normal, like a replacement for an average 9-to-5 income is not a pipe dream. It just takes as much work or more than any other job, and you're doing it alone generally.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. We see what you do, and we associate a lot of glamour and romance with it, but there's no denying all of the hard work that goes into it. And I think with that, I'd love to go ahead and just open things up to questions. Do we have some questions here?
Yeah.
Also for fun, like you did. I studied cinema, but I never worked in the industry because it's not that developed in Spain. And I'm currently going solo, and I'm making this independent docuseries. And because it has to do with cultural exchange, it has to do with Japan mostly. And people foreigners who practice Japanese arts outside of Japan. And I think something, maybe some kind of collaborations with Japan Airlines or something similar to what you did with Cathay Pacific, or even with National Geographic, if I'm really lucky in that sense, would be a nice way to distribute it, to get more people to see it instead of just, posting it on YouTube and having, 4 people see it. So I wanted to ask you if you have any practical tips, or how did collaborations with Cathay Pacific and National Geographic come to be? And yeah, thanks again.
Sure, sure. I don't know if I can give any direct actionable tips, because my collaborations with Nat Geo and Cathay Pacific, they were just functions of emails to my inbox. And even the people who contacted me for those particular instances, they're not like around anymore. So I can't, like, I would not know how to reach out to Cathay Pacific anymore, because the people, yeah, it's been a few years and there's been turnover in the staff. And National Geographic has closed the short film showcase that they used to run. For several years, they reposted other people's short films on their YouTube channel, and they had a dedicated website for short films. And last time I checked, which was, I guess, a couple of years ago, but Short Film Showcase was completely defunct. It doesn't exist. It didn't exist. And they did reach out to me after my Mongolia film got staff picked on Vimeo, and they wanted me to do cut downs for their Instagram, or what was it? No, it was their Facebook back then. They wanted me to cut it down and give them little bite-sized chunks that they could post on their Facebook. I don't know if they're still doing that, and I don't know who does that. So it's kind of like you just have to post first. And if you reach a wider audience, then they will come to you, trying to repurpose that. Otherwise, I think the connections that need to be made they're offline. They're in person. It's a matter of like actually hanging out with either National Geographic photographers, photo editors, talking to other people who are actively contributing, finding a community online, maybe that's more open, like a photography community, or going to one of those travel blogger meetups. There's many of them around the world, and just chatting with people and getting the word on the street, because I have not done that kind of outreach myself. And the posts that you're referring to that I did, those were 5, 6, even like 7 years ago. And sort of the game has changed. Social media changes every few years. Sorry, I can't be more helpful. That's kind of me, long-winded way of saying I don't know.
No, I mean, it's perfectly fine. It's more or less what I expected, because I'm already doing like the outreach that you are commenting, right? And because perhaps I'm not as consistent, because I simply cannot have as regular of an output on YouTube as to build it faster. But yeah, I understand it's the same steps to follow. It just takes longer. Thank you.
Well, with
Anyway.
YouTube, you have to post regularly. That doesn't mean you have to post all the time. It means that if you're going to post every 3 weeks, you have to post like every 3 weeks. You can't post like, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 9 weeks, then 3 videos in a row, and then wait a year and then post. So pick something you can create regularly, and then make sure it's realistic that you keep doing the same type of video. You don't switch it up every time. You have to do the same kind of video at approximately the same interval, whatever interval you set for yourself. And that's really the only way to experience growth on YouTube. And you just have to, if you don't love it, you have to at least be able to tolerate it, the grind of outputting videos on a regular basis like that. So choose your topic and your format carefully.
All right, Brandon, thank you.
Hi, Mary.
I was just curious about model releases, particularly with your personal projects or projects you're not doing for a major brand.
Do I get them? You're just asking? Okay, so with model releases, I used to get more model releases before social media became more ubiquitous, because when I started doing these travel films in like 2013, 2014, 2015, Instagram wasn't really a thing. And I was posting mostly on Vimeo, and I was expecting to eventually send them to maybe like film festivals, in which case I tried to get people to sign model releases as much as possible. Nowadays, because I'm primarily shooting for social media, and because people are just generally more social media savvy, I consider like as long as somebody understands the purpose of the video, why I'm filming them, what it's for, I consider that to be consent, and I've never had a problem with that. And people usually ask to be tagged, either themselves or their business, or like I filmed the Semana Santa in Spain. The Brotherhoods in the Semana Santa wanted to be tagged. They wanted their name in the credits. They wanted me to put them in the description. So that essentially is consent to me. You know, if they want to be a co-author of this thing or be mentioned or tagged, then I assume there's extremely low risk of any of them coming back to me and asking me to take it down or becoming litigious about it, because these are primarily like non-commercial projects. But if I'm getting paid to do it by a brand, if I'm doing like sponsored video for YouTube, then and I hire a model, let's say, then yes, I will get a model release.
Do any of your films for social media turn into something more where people, maybe someone wants to purchase it or use it for another reason that you might need a model release for? Has that ever happened?
Yes, and I have to turn down a lot of licensing requests because I don't have model releases. A lot of people that I film, for these travel videos, yeah, I have a lot of it's usually documentaries or there's a lot of like, for instance, like I made Morocco Arise recently, a short film about Morocco, and I got inquiries from people who were making economic development themed documentaries for clients in Morocco. So they wanted to use my footage to promote certain kinds of business and economic development in Morocco through initiatives that were run by the kingdom or private companies. And generally for those purposes, if I don't have a release, I'm not gonna release that footage if it like shows somebody's face clearly, because it is a sort of a for-profit video. It's not completely a non-profit educational kind of thing. So yeah, I do have to turn down quite a few requests, or I tell them, this is how to find the people I filmed. You go get a release, you come back to me, and then I'll sign a contract to release it with you.
Thank you, Brandon. Chris Bogart, you had a question early on when Brandon was talking about how much footage he was shooting. And can you re-ask your question, Chris?
Yes, Brandon, it involves Morocco Rise. I saw your commentary on it, and you said for that one, it was like 6 terabytes of video you had to go through. What techniques? Because you shoot a lot of video, you take these things. How do you manage it? Or do you have developed tricks or a system to manage all this video, because you are also the editor also?
Yeah. So every day after I shoot, I ingest all the video and I rename it according to the day that it was shot, and I import it into my editing software as its own bin. Every day has its own timeline, its own bin, and I create a string out. So a string out or a select, that's basically all the video clips on a timeline from one day with the definitely unusable parts cut out. The camera drop, out of focus stuff, whatever. So usually after I shoot, as I'm, eating dinner or as I'm like unwinding for the day, I import all the footage and I start cutting out like the really bad parts. And then the string out becomes my reference for that day, not the raw footage, the string out. So at the end of a 17-day shoot, I have 17 timelines, one per day. And those timelines contain only the footage that might actually be used, which usually cuts out about 60 to 80% of my footage. And that makes it more manageable. And then what I'll do is if I get inspired by one day's footage, I'll create another timeline, and I call that scene. So I create a timeline that's a cut down of a single day, and maybe I'll create a few little vignettes out of that day. So then I have like little 30-second chunks out of my 20-minute string out timeline. And those little chunks are what I will most likely include in the master timeline. So basically it's a 3-stage process: string out, scene, master. And I pull mostly from the scenes into the master, but if the scenes aren't cutting it, I go to the string outs. And very rarely do I ever have to go back to the raw footage.
Okay. Thank you for that. And one last question. You said,
Sure.
How many languages do you speak?
English, and I speak Spanish very poorly. Like,
Okay.
years in high school, you know, the standard public education regime. So
Because I saw
I
those
I
videos
can
also.
navigate the hell out of a menu. Yeah, I can do Tex-Mex like a pro.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Brandon, you were talking about your editing. That brings up Bob Christ's question to you about software. Bob, can you ask yours?
Yeah, Brandon, when you started, you edited in Final Cut. Now I think I understand that you're using DaVinci. Is there anything you miss about Final Cut?
Sure. Yeah, I missed the magnetic timeline a lot. It was very intuitive. I liked moving chunks of clips because when you start layering clips, it's very difficult to move like a multi-layered clip all as one in Resolve. You have to sort of select and very carefully copy paste and move other stuff around. Whereas in Final Cut, it's sort of like, you know, globs of clay. Each clip is like another glob of clay and they all stick together like a big, you know, Play-Doh, like, you know, ice cream cone that you're making. And then you can just drag it around and stick it to some other pieces. And I really liked that feeling. And Resolve doesn't have that kind of a tactile feeling at all. It's very, very, yeah, mechanical.
Yeah, as a still shooter, I found that Final Cut was kind of the easiest way to segue into video because I tried Premiere and it made me cry. And, you know, and so Final Cut, well, iMovie at first was the thing that was my entry drug, and then Final Cut. But a lot of people are abandoning it lately, and I still like the way it works, and again, too old to learn anything different.
Well, Final Cut's great until you need to do more complex color. And once you need to start like grouping clips for color, because everything I shoot now is log. I'm not really shooting Rec 709 anymore. So when you're shooting log and you're shooting multiple cameras, you have different kinds of log that you have to keep track of. And Final Cut doesn't, at least when I quit Final Cut, it didn't have a really good way of doing that. Whereas in Resolve, you can take all of your log clips from each type of camera and put them all in a group. So you have all your Sony clips, one group, all of your Canon clips, one group, all of your GoPro clips, one group, and they all get the same color treatment, which makes it a lot easier to work with log. That's why, yeah, mostly why I use Resolve.
Brandon, speaking of you're shooting with multiple cameras, and I wondered, outside of doing it as a product review or as a tutorial, would you ever use something like an Insta360 or, you know, with a 1-inch sensor mixed in with your mirrorless?
Yeah, I did in my Morocco video. In Morocco Arise, I used the 360 quite a bit. You just have to really be careful of the limitations because it's a very limited camera. It's a specialty camera. It's good for natural light environments. It's not so good for artificial light environments because it will flicker. You'll get light flicker because you're usually using a faster shutter speed. It's better with artificial colors. So like graffiti looks good, but rocks, trees, forests don't look so good with a 360 camera just because of, I don't know, some technical reasons and some stuff I don't really understand. But it's so like in Morocco, because I was generally in artificial environments, even though they were ancient, like the riads or the Medinas, the old city streets and the old houses. These were static artificial environments with artificial color, like paint on them. That looks good on a 360 camera, artificial color. I don't know why, but it does. So I could use it a lot in Morocco. But if I did a film about, let's say, you know, New Zealand or something, and I was walking around a lot of forests, I was shooting in really contrasty environments with a lot of, you know, light and shadow and leaves and bark and, you know, waterfalls and stuff. 360 would not be such a good choice for that because those things don't represent so well. So you really have to be careful about the types of subjects you shoot. But yeah, if you stay away from what it's not good at, you can get shots that otherwise would be much more difficult. The main thing I would use the 360 for on most shoots is an overhead angle. If you're trying to get a top down from the ceiling and you want a wide shot and you don't want to rig stuff, the 360 is great because it has that invisible stick, which disappears, and you don't have to frame the shot. You just put it up there and then you find your frame later. So, you know, it's always hard to get the camera pointed down at just the right spot when you're doing an overhead type shot. With the 360, you just, you know, find the middle of the table or whatever, you put it directly above the table, and then you stand back with the pole and you got yourself a perfect overhead shot and you don't need to rig anything. So that's the most practical thing.
Great. Great answer. Thank you very much.
Cool.
All right. Dennis, you had a question about some of Brandon's work.
You mentioned something about a ballet in Europe, a new upcoming project. Boy, that's exciting. I have a great interest in that art form, a lot of context over there. So I'm interested in what you plan to do, if you can relay any information. Thank you.
Well, this one's brand new. I mean, I just had my first sort of exploratory call with the screenwriter of this. It's a short film. All I can say basically is it's about a ballerina and a violinist, and they're both sort of broken in their own way, physically, mentally, and they have sort of an unexpected connection, and they create an unusual like piece of art, music, moving art together. And beyond that, like all the details are still being worked out, but probably it would be filmed in Budapest, in Hungary. So that's that project. It's in a very early stage, but probably would be shot sometime March, April, something like that.
That sounds very interesting. I know a few broken ballerinas.
I think every athlete's in pain, right? That's just life. You're always injured. So it's a very relatable story, I think.
I look forward to it.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, me too. I'm hoping it all comes to fruition.
Where do you see your work evolving in the next, say, 5 years? Do you have creative goals or business goals that you would like to achieve?
I want to move away from just doing like travel videos, basically. I've been trying to explore other formats, other genres, not necessarily like feature docs though, which is kind of the next natural step from what I've done. Just because I already did, like the stuff I did for MTV was very similar to long form documentary, and I kind of burned myself out on that. So that's why I'm doing, for instance, like, you know, this project in Hungary would be a narrative short film. The action stuff I've been doing is sort of like, it's narrative, but it's just a part of the process. Like I'm just learning how to coordinate fights and stunts and things like that. And then I'm on the lookout for other projects that maybe straddle the line between documentary and narrative. And once I find something, or once I get my own idea that I really, you know, want to move on, then I want to do basically longer form work and either try to create, you know, something to sell the video on demand or streaming, or get into film festivals, or just create it for, you know, just for art, and maybe have gallery screenings or something like that. But the goal is basically to continue developing as an artist, and meanwhile also keep up the YouTube channel, those sponsored videos, and try to get more creative with those. Try to maybe group sponsorships so that I'm able to do bigger projects with these sponsorships, so that I can dig more into creatively and get longer timelines making those sponsored products, videos, so I can create something bigger and better out of them. So yeah, basically it's all about trying to inject more creativity into my work and do stuff that I haven't done before.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I don't have a camera with me right now. Yeah, so Brandon, as most people would agree, your videos, what make your videos really good is the storytelling. And to add to the storytelling, the pacing is very intriguing in each video. So what would you recommend to new filmmakers who aspire to bring out the best of a place through the video's pacing? Because like for me, I studied in Japan, and I got a lot of footages during my stay there, but when I come to edit, the pacing of a video, the length of the clips of the footages one by one really don't, it makes my headache. So what would you recommend?
Well, the pacing, look, that's all changing these days. First of all, Instagram Reels, TikToks, you know, that's taking over, right? And it has a completely different pacing than the kind of video that I'm used to making. But at least for the videos that I make, like the travel films that I've made, Pacing is a function of the subject. If I'm filming something with a lot of action, it will have a faster pace. If I'm filming it in an exciting way, it will have a faster pace. But if I'm just filming the same type of thing over and over, like let's say, I'm fascinated by my girlfriend, as I am, and I love to film her walking around and looking at stuff, which I do. Those shots are all going to have the same pace. And if I try to cut it like this, it's going to look stupid because it's not natural to the pace. It won't fit. So I have to vary what I shoot in order to get a different pace in the edit. The pacing doesn't come from the edit alone. It comes from the subject and filming a variety of subjects. So if I film boys playing football on the street and they have a really intense game, and I film a lot of close-ups, a lot of wide, low tracking shots. I film them kicking the ball directly at my GoPro. I film their faces after they score a goal and they're fist pumping. That's fast-paced stuff, and I can cut that fast and it feels natural. So then I can combine that with the slower shots of, let's say, somebody waiting for the ferry by the harbor. And that creates a natural dichotomy in the pacing just through the footage itself. So the problem usually comes down to the footage, not the editing.
See, great, thanks.
Sure.
Brandon, on that question of pacing and the story you're trying to tell, how does that relate to music selection?
Yeah, that makes sense. The thing is, though, if you try to start with the music, you may pick music that was wrong for the actual what the pace ends up being, and then you get sort of tied to that music because everything's cut to it, and you just don't want to change it, even though you really should. I've had that problem. So I'll just pick some piece of music because it's convenient and it was already on my hard drive, not putting too much thought into it. And then I create the whole edit around that piece of music. And then I realize, oh man, that music was actually pretty lame. I just chose the easy thing. Too hard to change it now. I'll just leave it. So what I do usually now, because I've cut similar stuff over and over and over, is I will cut without music, but I'll have sort of a metronome in my head. Basically just, how fast are we going here? Is it like this or is it like this? And then I find music that has sort of that pace. Once I've done a rough edit, I drop the music in and I just sort of nudge over all my edits to be more on the beat, or I look for happy accidents where my existing edit falls on a good point of the beat. And another thing I will do is I will have one or two drops, one or two hit points where I definitely want the image and the music to sync up. So usually that point, let's say it's the point where someone swings the baseball bat and they hit the ball, right? That's not an isolated moment. There's stuff that happens before it. So the pitcher has to pitch the ball, right? Okay, that's the shot that goes before that. And then before that, maybe there's a wide shot establishing the baseball field. That's the shot before that. Now I've got 3 shots that are linked to a hit point of the music. And then maybe I have the crowd cheering after. So I've got 4 shots. So you've got a shot chunk, we've got a hit point on the music, and then we've got the rest of the music stretching out in either direction. And I will adjust the rest of my edit, the visual edit, around that one sync point, and I will let stuff not be so synchronized around those points. But as long as everything stays synchronized, the moment he swings that bat, to the audience, it will feel like the cut was synced well to the music. And then I have more freedom to edit the rest of, to adjust the rest of my edit without losing the sync.
Okay, great. I've seen in the credits for some of your films, it shows that you've also commissioned original music. What drives those decisions? Is it basically, budget allows for it, or is when you just can't find what you want in stock, or?
Whenever possible, I want to commission original music because otherwise somebody else's video is going to have the same music as my video. And I don't want that. I want people to hear the music and think of my video and only my video. So that's one thing that drives it. It just feels more like a film to me if it has original music. Another thing is wanting something impossibly specific. So for my Mongolia film, I wanted music that was Mongolian sounding and had the influence of Kazakh music and had some tooth and throat singing and that kind of thing. But I didn't want it to just be traditional music. I wanted to also have the beat and the cadence of a modern movie score. And the funny thing is, actually, my temp music for the Mongolia film was a hip hop song by this guy Rory. It's called Devil's Whisper, which is a really cool song. But it's this sort of folky hip hop like track that originally I actually tried to license. I thought this would be awesome if it's hip hop in the soundtrack of this film about Mongolia. But they wanted like, I don't know, $20,000 or something for the song. And I said, nope, all right, we're doing original, we're going composed. So I didn't want to lose the pacing of the edit, but I wanted the same feeling as that hip hop track. And I wanted to make it more Mongolian, more Kazakh sounding. I wanted to regionalize it. And for that, I had to go to original composition. And the other thing is, if you feel like the pacing of your video is great, but there's just no existing music that exactly fits the pacing, then hiring an original composition is the only way to preserve the pacing.
And without getting just into specific, your specific budget, so you mentioned, paying $20,000 to license something is,
That was above my budget.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't even know what a composer would charge for such a thing. Is there, where? Speak to
I mean,
generalities about that, or?
it all depends. It all depends on the distribution, on if the composer needs the job to build their portfolio, or if they're just, they're just executing to get the work. But you should expect to spend. I think it's usually like a minute, like they charge per minute, and it can be anywhere from like a couple $100 a minute to like $1,000 a minute, something like that for music, for original. And of course, if it's like a really well-known composer, then they're going to charge even more, and it will get way, way higher. But there's other ways to knock down the price. Like you could negotiate limited exclusivity. Like for one of my short films, I got the price down a bit because the composer agreed to only 6 months of exclusivity, and then they would relicense the music to other people. And for me, that was long enough. I said, okay, you know what? Fine. You give me 6 months. That's enough time to see if it gets into festivals, see if it gets a staff pick. The majority of the views are going to happen in those 6 months. After that, if you want to make more money off the music by licensing it out, then that's okay. And they did. And things turned out fine. And that made the music like twice as cheap for me, or like even cheaper than that. So yeah, there's always ways to negotiate with the composer. But if you want exclusive outright, like you want to get it off the market completely, that's the most expensive option. And it's going to be at least several $100s per minute, probably more like $1,000 per minute for most experienced composers.
And do you submit the final edit to them, or a rough cut? When do they start composing?
It depends on how good of friends you are with the composer. I've hired my friend many times, and he knew that I was giving him rough cuts, and he would just create like overall themes, and then I would change the edit, and he would just sort of modify the timing a bit, and he kind of just worked with me. But if you're working with a composer who's not necessarily your buddy, then you want to give them something as close to the final cut as possible, because changing the timing of the music is very time consuming for the composer, and they'll probably impose additional charges, additional fees, if you need a lot of changes.
Alfredo, can you ask yours?
Yes. Hello, Brandon.
Hello.
I'm Alfredo from Costa Rica, so my English is not the best. So I'm trying to get into the wedding photography by videography. So I saw one of your latest videos about the Samyang Cine V. That the Cine lenses that have the same weight, so there is no need to rebalance the gimbal. So my question is, it's worth buying them, or is better to buy like a zoom lens, for wedding by videography?
Okay, so you're asking about the Samyang VAF Cine autofocus lenses.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting very specific. Okay. Those lenses, for weddings, I wouldn't use them because they're primes and you need to move fast during a wedding. Almost all wedding videographers that I know of use a 24-70 zoom.
All right.
Or you use a 28-75, something like that. Yeah, and f2.8 is usually fine. You don't need a prime. You don't need that super wide aperture, because it's better to have the subject in focus than have it be out of focus. And during a wedding, people move around. You can't always predict where they're going to be, what they're going to be doing. So f2.8 is usually the sweet spot. Yeah.
Nice.
So I get that prime set for weddings now.
Nice. Thank you very much, Brandon.
Good thing.
All right, thank you. Darren Hunter, can you ask your question, please?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for you about indoor versus outdoor shooting. Most of the footage you talked about, like the log grouping that you have in Resolve and all that technical stuff that helps you do color balancing in the same groups. Most of your videos are outdoor or urban with available light. Do you make adjustments to your whole rig and setup and your whole working methods when you're shooting indoor and indoor environments, or ever have to use supplemental lighting?
For commercial shoots, yeah, I've used a lot of artificial light. You know, we shot indoors. It's not my specialty. It's not usually what I get hired for, but I have done it. And the way we usually shoot indoors is somebody else, there's a gaffer who's handling the majority of the lighting. And we usually have a grip truck. So it's grip truck, gaffer, and they usually have a gaffer's assistant. All of that is generally handled by the production company. And I just relay sort of the general thing that I want to the gaffer, and they execute it using, you know, stuff from the grip truck. And I have minimal involvement. I just tell them, look, I'm going to move the camera around and you got to give me lighting or you won't be in the frame. So we do a lot of Hollywooding, you know, like this, holding the light so they can get out of the way, or they can sort of adjust on the fly as I move my camera. And a lot of reflectors instead of light. You know, I try to bounce natural light whenever possible, or like doing a butterfly overhead, just softening what's already there, as opposed to adding supplemental lighting. That way, everything in front of me, I can film. So basically, I try to avoid lighting setups that are too restrictive of the camera, because I work improvisationally, and if I have to be too restricted, I can't really do my style.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, I think we are going to wrap it up here. Jim, if you can come back, Jim Talkington.
And I just want to thank you so much, Brandon. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you. I want you to remind us all how we can find Unscripted, because I think you'll have people with continuing questions that are probably answered there. And I just value so much not only your generosity in sharing this time with us, but your ability to articulate things and think about how you do things so that they can be shared. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you guys for, you know, bringing me on here. I had a great time. Hope I answered the questions to satisfaction. I just, you know, I want people to get something out of this. So I hope you did. And yeah, just go to brandonlee.com or unscripted.com if you want to learn more about me, or if you want to learn more about my film school.